Thank God we have not reached that stage of killing each other in Malaysia yet. Here we condemn and demonize by accusing our enemies as kafir, anti-God, anti-Islam, anti-Sharia. It's kind of like, you know, make police reports, hold demonstrations, condemn them in mosques and Friday sermons, ban their books. But if we don't do anything now, and this is my appeal to the audience today, if we don't do anything today to change this hostile and hateful ways of engaging with differences, we are only a few steps away from violence. Just condemning and demonizing those who disagree with you cannot be the way of wisdom to resolve a conflict, a difference. We know these so-called Islamic laws have been drafted and promulgated and then amended and adopted and amended again, all by human beings. That's not a divine process. That's a very secular process. They are the products of thoroughly human and fallible interpretive processes and reflect subjective socio-historical circumstances. The hudud law, the Faraid law, the family law are not divine. The sources of the laws are indeed, may indeed be divine, but the engagement with the divine text and the human-made fiqh jurisprudence is a human process, and the product of that engagement is a human-made law as understood, drafted, debated, adopted, and implemented by human beings. Therefore, they may be flawed, and they can be changed and challenged and amended or repealed. After all, the Terengganu state government and the past amended that hudud law after saying this is divine law and cannot be changed when there was a public outcry over its provision that women who claim rape and cannot produce 4 pious male eyewitnesses will be charged for qazaf and sentenced to 40 lashes. It was not so divine after all. If we as Muslims and Malaysia as a Muslim country want Islam to remain relevant to our lives and to remain a source of law and public policy, then we must begin to rationally discuss on how best to do this, given the diverse interpretations, understandings, interests, needs, demands, and principles that govern and influence us today. In Surah An-Nahl, verse 125, Allah said, "Call them to the path of your Lord with wisdom and words of good advice, and reason with them in the best way possible." Can I plead that we use this as our guidance instead of condemning and demonizing those who differ? How can we have a respectful and productive engagement so that the justice, mercy, and compassion of Islam become core values in our process of lawmaking and law enforcement and in our daily lives? I hope today's public forum will build on this process of civil engagement that is so necessary for us to move forward. For a start, I hope, we can all agree that Quranic teachings encompass the principles of justice, adil, equality, musawah, dignity, karamah, and love and compassion, mawaddah wa rahmah. I hope we can also agree that these principles reflect universal norms and are consistent with contemporary human rights standards and human yearning for a life of dignity. Thus, instead of engaging in endless debates on whether Islam is compatible with human rights, whether democracy is Islamic or not, whether women are equal to men in Islam, while our countries and our communities are locked in political instability, economic and social backwardness, can we focus our energy and our time to find solutions to deal with the real problems facing the Ummah? In February 2009, Sisters in Islam initiated the launch of a new movement called Musa, Equality in Arabic. This is a global initiative for equality and justice in the Muslim family. We brought together about 250 Muslim activists and scholars from 47 countries, including 32 OIC countries, Organization of Islamic Conference, engaged in family law reform and issues of equality and justice for Muslim women. And talking about the strategies, talking about the scholars that change in the Muslim world is possible. We felt it was important for us to bring to international attention that there's already a paradigm shift in Muslim theological and jurisprudential scholarship, that there is possibility to reconcile the teachings of Islam with human rights, with women's rights, and that Muslim women throughout the world are at the center of this transformation. This sharing, we hope, would build an international discourse and public voice that assert equality is possible within Islam and build the momentum to propel forward our efforts to protect the existing rights in Muslim family laws. And in many countries, these rights that women's groups have achieved over the decades are being hit by a backlash, yeah, in terms of chiseling away, as in Malaysia, at the rights we had gained already. And also, of course, to promote our demands for reform of the discriminatory provisions at the national and regional levels. What Musawa hopes to bring, and I just want to share you, this is part of the Islamic Feminist movement at the global level, what Musawa hopes to bring to the larger women's and human rights movement is this: an assertion that Islam can be a source of empowerment and not a source of oppression and discrimination. An effort to open new horizons for rethinking the relationship between Islam and human rights, equality and justice. An offer to open a new constructive dialogue where religion is no longer an obstacle to equality for women, but a source of liberation. A collective strength of conviction and courage to stop governments and patriarchal authorities and ideological non-state actors from the convenience of using religion and the word of God to silence our demands for equality. And we wanted to create a space where activists, scholars, decision makers, working within the human rights or the Islamic framework of both, like Sisters in Islam, can interact and mutually strengthen our common pursuit of equality and justice for Muslim women. Just as the violence against women movement in 25 years have resulted over 100 countries in the world today with laws that make domestic violence a crime, and I must remind all of you that Malaysia holds the honor of being the first Muslim country to enact a domestic violence legislation that makes domestic violence a crime. And we're seen as a model in many Muslim countries that are now enacting such laws. We dare to hope that in years to come, many more Muslim countries will join the leadership provided by countries like Morocco and Turkey to enact family laws that regard marriage as a partnership of equals, where the legal framework recognizes equality between the husband and the wife, and where men and women will have the equal right to marry, to divorce, to custody and guardianship of our children. We think this is possible because the values we believe in and the tools for reform exist within the Islamic tradition and within the realities of the constitutional, democratic, modern and internationally engaged country that we live in today. What makes Musawa empowering for many Muslim women is its bold endeavor to reclaim the spirit of equality and justice within Islam, which it sees as compatible with international human rights standards. In highlighting women's realities, amplifying women's voices, both historical and contemporary, and striving to legitimize these perspectives, Musawa is filling a void that exists in the discourses on human rights and on Islam in much of the Muslim world and in intergovernmental organizations such as the UN system. Instead of just condemning the injustices arising from patriarchal customs and laws that take their legitimacy from particular readings of Islam's sacred text, Musawa offers a constructive way forward through a holistic framework based on new understandings of Muslim jurisprudence, laws and practices in ways that are responsive to women's needs and in concord with Islamic teachings and human rights principles. I think most of us here today agree that there is a place for religion in public law and policy. And let me say that Musawa and Sisters in Islam and all of us who claim to be feminists also engage with many feminist women's rights in Islam and by the newly launched Musa global movement, that this can only that the place of religion in public law and policy, that this can only be realized within the framework of constitutional and democratic governance at home and international law abroad. If Islam is to remain as a source of law and public policy, it must pass the test of public reason and be subject to safeguards within the framework of constitutionalism, human rights, and citizenship. The challenge, as posed by Islamic and human rights scholars and activists, is for the advocates of Islamic laws and policies to support their proposals in free and open public debate by reasons that are accessible and convincing to citizens, regardless of their religions or other beliefs. And those who disagree must also enjoy the public space to present their counter-proposals on an equal footing, whether their arguments are based on a different set of Sharia principles or from other religious, constitutional, or human rights perspectives. In Malaysia, the public space for debate on matters of religion is continuously being tested and contested. The search for just solutions can only take place if we as citizens protect and expand this space and consider the possibilities of equality and justice from multiple perspectives, from the religious perspective, international human rights, constitutional and fundamental guarantees, and our lived realities. The use of Sharia arguments for public law and policy must be grounded in the realities of modern-day life in a democratic constitutional state and a world linked by international law where human rights, women's rights, and democracy constitute the dominant ethical paradigm. We all know that Malaysia is at a turning point. The Muslim world is at a turning point. The Arab Spring is an uprising for democracy, human rights, women's rights, socio-economic justice. The Prime Minister's path-breaking announcements on Malaysia Day showed that he needed to respond to these new political realities in Malaysia and in the Muslim world today. Well, the proof of the pudding is of course in the eating. The ensuing debate in the shaping of new laws and policies, the inevitable opening up of the public space, which I hope will, enrich us further as a democratizing society and build a culture where our public debate is civil, informed, and evidence-based. And that this trend towards change and reform must also embrace the necessity and the possibility for change in our understanding of Islam. My plea is that we as a society must also embrace the reality that an Islam of kindness,